introduce my colleague, Commissioner Robert Patrick, who serves as presiding officer of the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners and has previously served as a city councilman in the city of Doraville. It is my honor and pleasure to present to you Commissioner Robert Patrick.
Commissioner Mereda Davis Johnson, that is such a warm welcome. I truly appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Commissioner Robert Patrick, and I have the dual honor of serving as both the District 1 DeKalb County Commissioner, as well as the presiding officer for the Board of Commissioners. Again, I'd like to thank Deputy Presiding Officer Mereda Davis Johnson, who also serves as the committee chair for the Ops Committee, for her vision and leadership in hosting this town hall. I'd also like to thank the members of the Voter Registration and Election Board, especially a name familiar to everyone, former Commissioner Nancy Jester, for serving. Your oversight and leadership will serve the department and the residents very well. And again, thank you to the voters of DeKalb County for being active and responsive groups of voters. A final thank you is to Commissioner Ted Terry for starting an ad hoc committee last year that sort of was part of the team that got us to where we are today. And it's important to remember that there are many hands that go together for every success that we share. Tonight's town hall is timely. There's never been a more pressing time for Americans to engage in their constitutional right. That right is to vote. And DeKalb County voters are doing that. While we have a little more work to do, it is my hope that meetings like tonight will encourage more DeKalb County voters to continue to have confidence in our election processes and procedures. I believe the Voter Registration and Elections Board will continue to have the necessary good relationship with the public that's so critical. Through forums like tonight, and transparency, DeKalb County can foster trust and respect throughout our democratic process. Again, thank you all for being here tonight. Turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Presiding Officer. We appreciate you for being here with us tonight. And so as you all know, tonight we're meeting our new Board of Elections members. But just before we meet our new Board of Elections members, we are honored to have with us tonight our Congressman from the 4th Congressional District, Congressman Hank Johnson. Congressman, take it away.
Thank you, Reverend, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me here to bring you the latest from Capitol Hill on voting rights legislation. First, I want to welcome and congratulate the new board members, the new board chair, and the new executive director of the DeKalb County Board of Registration and Elections. It's my honor and pleasure to be a part of Commissioners Johnson and Patrick's Town Hall meeting, and I'm proud to help lend a national perspective to what's happening locally. And before I begin, I do want to congratulate Presiding Officer Patrick and also Deputy Presiding Officer Johnson for your ascensions to those leadership posts on the DeKalb County Commission. Congratulations. And as I begin, I want to be clear, voting is not and should not be an obstacle course. It's not a privilege. Voting is a right. And when over half the states in the union are trying to create more barriers to make it more difficult to vote, and the other half are trying to make voting easier for all, we find ourselves with a democracy that is at cross purposes with itself, simultaneously becoming more draconian while more progressive. To quote Abraham Lincoln, our democracy cannot continue half slave and half free. The stark contrast between the active voter suppression here in Georgia with automatic voting in states like Oregon proves just that. Because when you fail to protect this fundamental right for one, you break it for all. Last year alone, 19 states across the nation passed 34 laws to restrict access to the ballot. And despite this, I remain undeterred. Full participation in our democracy will always be the goal. So we must be relentless and unapologetic in our commitment to vote. And that may mean long lines and less drop boxes and more provisional ballots. I'm not excusing that, but we must remain committed to this cause. We must remain vigilant and continue this fight no matter how exhausting and how much we want to give up. Because when you break this voting for one, you break it for all. And we must continue to demand that every voice be heard in this American conversation and move forward with the American experiment. Protecting our most basic freedom should not be partisan. Never before has a statute done more to advance this nation's better angels than the Voting Rights Act, as evidenced by the strong bipartisan support it has enjoyed previously. Republican presidents Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush all supported this pillar of our democracy. 4 times, the Congress has reauthorized the Voting Rights Act on a strong bipartisan vote. In 2006, the House voted 390 to 33, and the Senate voted 98 to 0 for renewal of the Voting Rights Act. But when it came to passing the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Act last month, the Senate failed because it was more concerned with preserving a procedural rule than it was in terms of protecting this precious right to vote. So you all know what it means from here. We cannot be discouraged. In the words of John Robert Lewis, my dear departed colleague, we cannot give up. We can't give in. We can't give out. We stay the course, achieve the goal, which is the right to vote for everyone. And so it's going to mean that we don't let obstacles deter us. And it's we, the voters, who determine who will set the rules in the future. So we must get out, exercise this right to vote. I'm very proud to be with you all tonight. Excuse my surroundings. I'm a little dark because I'm in a phone booth off the House floor where we are actually voting right now. So with that, I will yield it back, and thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Congressman Johnson. We appreciate the work that you're doing for us, and thank you for that wonderful legislative update. Now we've come to the time in our town hall meeting where we will hear from the new chair and the new members of the DeKalb County Board of Voter Registration and Elections. I'll begin with brief introductions of our members, and I'll begin with our board chair, Ms. Dele Loman-Smith. Dele Loman-Smith is a past local government executive and professional facilitator, a consultant, and a coach who uses her 20+ years of experience to lead individuals, teams, and organizations to higher levels of performance. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Dele Loman-Smith, if you'd just like to give us a wave there. Next, I'll introduce the vice chair of the board, Nancy Jester. Nancy Jester is a stay-at-home mom of 3 teenage children. She previously served on the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners. She's passionate about education issues and an ardent dog lover. Ladies and gentlemen, Nancy Jester. At this time, I'll also introduce to you all our next member, Ms. Carly Swift. Carly Swift is an attorney, community advocate who currently serves as seniors counsel for a Fortune 500 company. She began her career as a high school social studies teacher in Baltimore, Maryland for Teach for America. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Carly Swift. And finally, I'll introduce you to who you'll hear from also, our new DeKalb County Elections and Registration Director, Ms. Keisha Smith. Ms. Keisha Smith comes to the DeKalb County Board of Voter Registration and Elections, unanimously appointed, and she's coming with nearly 2 decades of progressive leadership from both public and private sectors. She emerged as a candidate, bringing her background of significant experience in strategic planning and operations management in complex organization. Tonight, we're so glad to have with us as well our director, Ms. Keisha Smith. I'll turn it over to you, Chair Dele Loman-Smith.
Thank you so much, Demetrius. Thank you, Commissioner Davis Johnson, Commissioner Patrick, and Congressman Johnson, who I believe has returned to his work. And thank you to my colleagues for being able to join us on this important event this evening. This is really timely, as Commissioner Patrick mentioned, in that we are heading into a very busy 2022 for every elections office in the state of Georgia, with the upcoming county elections as well as statewide elections. For DeKalb County, it's particularly important because, as you heard, we just appointed a new executive director. And I think that as we think about our responsibilities and what we signed up to do as members of the Board of Registration and Elections, there are two different things that really affect or support the ability of voters to vote and participate in democracy. And there's a lot of focus on policy, which of course shapes everything, but there's also an operational and a management piece. And from a DeKalb County standpoint, we understood coming into this new term that began for us in July of 2021, that we we wanted to have and needed to have leadership that reflected the changes that we're undergoing as a nation, as a county, that we're observing from an election standpoint, and that it requires leadership that has strong administrative and operational competence, and not simply an understanding of election code, but really how to manage, lead, communicate, engage the public as we're doing this evening, pivot and respond to challenges and changes in the environment. And we're thrilled that we were able to, in this very competitive environment, find an excellent executive director that we believe will help us to do that. The other priorities that we focused on really were laying the groundwork for our ongoing responsibilities. So our governance foundation, as a board, we updated that, really clarified and codified our roles, responsibilities, and expectations. And we are actively working to ensure that the department has the adequate resources and structure that it needs in order to be able to function. All of these things may seem like, sort of not the fun or exciting things that you talk about, but they directly affect voters' ability to be able to access the vote. If things are not managed well, voters will not have a good experience, and it will be much more difficult for them to exercise that right. So that was our responsibility to ensure that that happens in 2022. I will pause here and see if either the Vice Chair or Ms. Swift would like to weigh in, or if Commissioner Davis Johnson or anyone else has questions for us.
Madam Chair, just before we do that, I would like to remind everyone, if you have a question as you're hearing from the board, please put that question in the Q&A section, or if you're watching on DCTV or any other source, you may submit your question to district5@DeKalbCountyGA.gov. Thank you. Pardon the interruption.
I will chime in, Chairman Lemon-Smith, if you'll allow me, then, since you asked. I want to echo and say ditto to everything that you said. I think that since being coming on board in July with Ms. Swift, I think that we've seen a pretty big dynamic shift in the way the board is operating, and I feel that we're all rowing in the same direction now. And I think we have just successfully executed this search for our new executive director. And we had a very robust dialogue about that. And so I think that the voters of DeKalb County should feel assured that we looked at this environment. We carefully went through all of the resumes that we were sent, and had very detailed discussions among the board about what we were looking for, and had great interviews with some very smart folks, and came to a great conclusion with the process. So I'm very pleased with that. It was a unanimous decision, and I think that needs to be, reiterated to everyone. And we're looking forward to improving our processes, our voter outreach, and just becoming a more professional organization than we had previously seen. I think that one of the things that stands out to me that is different now going forward is also what has happened between the last couple of years and now with the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Elections, where we have come together advocating jointly. And I think there's just a unified spirit there for the types of improvements that we need to make to the budgeting process for the department so that we have the resources so we can fund this crucial function of government. Because if we don't have the election integrity that we all want and are looking for in the transparency, then everything is problematic after that. So I think that the Board of Elections and the Board of Commissioners is definitely united on that. And I commend the Board of Commissioners for recognizing that, and everyone from the CEO to the COO in DeKalb for understanding the nature of the lift that we're undertaking and supporting the Board of Elections. So I want to thank everyone. And the chair has been, I've said this at our board meetings, and I think it's very important that I say it here, and that Commissioner Patrick and Commissioner Davis Johnson understand. Our Chairwoman Smith has done a really amazing job with guiding where we came from in July to where we are now, and her leadership needs to be noted. She is an incredibly hard worker. She has done a tremendous amount of legwork for the board, and she is an asset to every voter, no matter your affiliation in DeKalb County. And I say that without any reservation. And I know that particularly my colleagues who work with me on the board know I don't say things lightly. So I want everyone to know that she's a gift to DeKalb. And the board is working very hard. We've got a lot to do in the next year. So I'm sure the Board of Commissioners is going to hear from us about additional budgeting requests that get made probably mid-year, that type of thing. But I know we're on the same page that we all want great elections. So thank you to Commissioner Patrick, Commissioner Davis Johnson for having this important town hall. And I appreciate the opportunity to say hello to everyone and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. I just wanted to say, to echo both of their comments. First, thanking the commissioners for all their hard work and their willingness to be collaborative with the new board. The additional comment that I'd add is I think that one thing about this board is that we want to hear from voters. I think it's very important that as we move forward, as we begin to operationalize changes that we may have to implement because of changes to law, that we hear from you and we understand how you're impacted by those changes. We want to be a board, we want to be, and I'll let Ms. Smith talk about how she sees her role, but we want to be a board that's here for voters. That's why we're in these positions. And so I think that's just very important to know as we move forward.
And we are pleased to have Miss Smith with us this evening. She's not even had her official start date yet. So we asked her to join us for just a couple minutes to say hello and be able to greet everyone. Keisha.
Thank you, Chairwoman Smith. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for having me here tonight with you. I'm not in Georgia tonight, but I look forward to being there in a few weeks, and I'm excited to come to DeKalb and work alongside the Board of Registration in elections, and to work with my staff and the community members and other stakeholders. I'm looking to build on recent successes and work collaboratively to provide a great voter experience. As the director, my focus will be on ensuring the integrity of our elections, improving operational efficiencies, investing more time and resources in training staff, and utilizing technology and innovation to enhance the overall experience. I'm excited, I'm energized. I look forward to working with you all and hearing from you all at one of our upcoming listening sessions. So Stay tuned for more information about where you can join us to provide input, to tell us what you are looking for, and to tell us how we can help you. Tonight, I'm very interested in hearing from the stakeholders here, and I look forward again to seeing you when I arrive to DeKalb County. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Smith. We're looking forward to having you join us. Again, reminding the public, if you have a question, please submit that question to district5@dekalbcountyga.gov, or you may submit your question through the Q&A option or the chat feature. So with that, Chairwoman Smith, you talked a little bit about that which you're looking forward to this year. I'd just like to hear from you and some of the other board members to talk about just a little bit more detail. What are some of the key factors that you look forward to helping make the vote more accessible to DeKalb County residents?
I think Ms. Smith touched on some of that. The key priorities for us as a board have been operational and organizational improvements and efficiencies there. So, it's not adequate to kind of do the same things over and over again. We always need to be taking a look at the way work gets done and making sure that it is being done efficiently with a high level of accuracy and quality assurance. And a big part of that is based on clear process documentation and procedures. And a lot of that has to be adapted as state laws change. Additionally, we've got, redistricting that happened this year, which requires moving voters to different districts and new new elected representatives, as well as a new voter registration system that is going to be introduced. So those are some major focuses for our staff that are coming up in the next month or two, right before we jump into a pretty demanding election cycle. So we've got to make sure they have the resources that they need. Ms. Smith mentioned training. We're going to have a much greater focus on ongoing professional development within the organization, as well as improving training for poll workers, making it much more modern. It's, the just in time and on demand modules to be able to refresh themselves. If you take poll worker training, 2 months or a month before you've got to go, and you have a bunch of other things that you're doing in between that time, you may need to refresh yourself. And we need to make sure that those things can happen easily, so that the poll workers can best respond to and meet the needs of the voters. So those are a number of the things that we will be working on. Of course, we have to phase those in over time as we respond to legal and statutory requirements, but that really is what we are excited to look forward to for the department.
Wonderful, so well stated, and thank you so much. I'd like to yield the floor to either Commissioner Davis Johnson or Commissioner Patrick, if you wanted to dialogue and engage with the board at all. And again, as folks are sending in their questions, sounds like you all are really focused on improving the customer experience, or the experience that our citizens of DeKalb are having. So we'd like to really thank you all for your tuning into that particular concern and making sure that the voter experience is second to none in DeKalb County. We would also like to commend you for the great work that you've done in the previous election in ensuring that everything operated, as you stated, with efficiency. So those of you who are watching at home, those of you who are listening, we want you to be reassured, and we want you to know that in DeKalb County, your voting experience is going to be one of the best that you can get in the country because of these great leaders that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Demetrius, and thank you, Ms. Chair. And one of the questions that I would have is, what do you see some of your biggest challenges? What are some of your biggest challenges that you see as we move towards the 22 elections.
Go ahead,
I-
Ms. Swift.
Sure, I can start, and I'm sure my colleagues are going to jump in. I think that as we think about focusing on the voter and making the experience of voting easier, there are some statutory and potential legal challenges that are going to prevent us from making all of the changes that we might want to implement. So, for example, in the last election, we were limited in the number of drop boxes we had based on changes to law. Again, that might impact the customer, our customer being the voter experience and their ability to vote with an absentee ballot. That is not something that we control. So we worked to ensure that there were drop boxes throughout the county, so that as that was limited, we were still they were geographically positioned so people would have access to them. I think in the 2020 election, we had 24-hour drop boxes that changed. So there are some statutory limitations that we have that present challenges. I think we have an opportunity though with our communication. So communicating to voters in a timely way, how they can vote, where they can vote, the availability of voting, and doing everything that we can to make sure that voting is accessible and is easy for voters within our statutory parameters.
And so thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you, Ms. Swift. And so with that, we talked about making sure the information is accessible with the communications. What website could folks go to if they wanted to learn about I'm sure y'all have plenty of frequently asked questions and information. I've seen your site. It's very amazing. And where can the public go to see that?
That is DeKalb please correct me if it's .org or is it DeKalbVotes.org?
So I actually think it's DeKalbVotes.com. We also have at DeKalb Votes on Twitter, and then there is a DeKalb voter registration page on Facebook. And so those are places that you can check us out. We have a great lead for communications that's working on various ways to reach voters.
Thank you so much. And so in the last election, you all, not only with your communications, did you make it accessible on web, but you also translated the information so that we could reach all communities. We have another question that's coming from our chat now. And someone says, what specific ways are you going to communicate to voters about how to vote beyond the internet and social media for those who don't have access to those methods?
So one of the things that our new director is going to be doing as she comes in is making her rounds throughout DeKalb County and meeting with different constituent groups and listening, but also taking the opportunity to share information. We actually have a very active public outreach group in the department that goes and responds to voter requests. They are extremely busy before and during election season. So if there are particular civic groups that would like demonstrations, for example, of the new equipment that we got in 2020 for the first time, then they're able to do that. They're able to come and speak to your group and answer questions about registration, about the use of absentee ballots, about in-person voting, overseas voting, and the like. So for those individuals who would like to engage more in a, at least as much as we can during a pandemic, in a more face-to-face manner, and may not have that access, they will be able to access our staff as they go around the county and engage with the voters.
Thank you so much. We have another question that's come in, and this question is very unique because it is geared towards the veteran population. And there previously stated by Mr. Fahim Rasal, the disabled veteran population in the past could have someone take their sealed ballot to the voting precinct. put in a Dropbox. But with the change of the laws and restrictions, disabled veterans have to figure out a way to drop their own ballot. And so the question is what can be done to provide some form of assistance for those veterans or individuals in those situations.
So I think that for that situation, which is an unfortunate side effect of the changes in state law, that there are a couple of options. One is that if they get their absentee ballots early enough, they can return those by mail. The concern is that if it's too close to the election, that it may not reach us in time to be counted. But if they're able to get their ballots early enough, that is still an option. For any disabled voter or infirmed or elderly voter, the state law does allow them to move to the front of the line. They do not have to stand in line. We are going to have to adapt our logistics because this change in state law requires absentee ballot drop boxes to be located within early voting sites, which means that now not only is there in-person voting traffic where we already experience long lines, now that drives absentee traffic to those same sites. So we will be making adjustments in terms of how we navigate and manage those logistics so that it is clear for voters who show up only to drop off their absentee ballots, that they don't end up in a long line of voters who are waiting to vote in person, if such a line does form. As I mentioned a moment ago, state law does allow them to move to the front of the line. So if there is any line, all they have to do is alert a poll worker or staff member there, and they will escort them to the front to be able to quickly drop off their ballot.
Thank you for that information. And so if you're listening and that the question which was asked applies to you, please make sure that you make note of those accommodations that are available to you. I'd like to say that in our past presidential election, it was a quite historic turnout, not just across this nation, but certainly in DeKalb County. With that in mind, to our new board members, I'd like to know from you, what are you focused on? You've talked about efficiency, you've talked about communications, but I want to know particularly from you, what are you focused on as we approach what looks like will be another historic year as we approach the gubernatorial and senatorial elections?
I can start that one if you prefer. Thank you, Mr. McCoy. It's so great to see you again too. Thanks for helping us navigate all the questions. I think, and it will shock no one on this panel, that I think one of the big key reforms that the new board is working on, and it is our budget, right? So I think for years, the elections and the operations of that department have been underfunded. And I don't really think that's not a fault of anyone per se. I think that there was just a historic apathy to right sizing the budget that came from, previous leadership, I think, in the department. And we weren't looking at the total amount that it really was costing to run the type of election we all want and expect, especially given the last few cycles and the changes and expectations that we have, and then also the new layers with COVID and all of those things. So we have to get the budget right. The budget is a statement of values in so many ways. And I think previously, the department was run sort of on a shoestring, and with all the new pressures and again, all the changes we've seen and the realities we've seen over the last couple of cycles, we've got to get that right. And, what I will say is, prior to the new construction of this particular Board of Elections, we had that ad hoc committee that the previous Board of Commissioners had put together, and folks were working to sort of bridge the gaps and understand what was going on, how was the budget working, why was it working that way, how could we improve it? And now with the new iteration of the Board of Elections and the new iteration of the Board of Commissioners, I think there is convergence to the successful attainment of properly budgeting for this department. And I get the sense from all of the commissioners, I've certainly gotten that sense from Commissioner Davis Johnson, Commissioner Patrick, who are both here, and others, Commissioner Terry, who's worked on this, that they understand that this particular department the budget needs to be fixed in so many ways. And so that's a great thing. That should, make all the voters and citizens of DeKalb very happy. So my focus, to your question, Mr. McCoy, was what am I specifically focused on? Well, everything kind of flows through the budget. If you don't have the money right, you don't get the things right. So I would, tell the voters and the folks in DeKalb County, and certainly share with everyone here, that I think you have alignment now with the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Elections on this particular issue. I think everyone's ready to get that budget right-sized. And that means changing the way some of the department operates. And as we get our new director in, Ms. Smith is going to, give us, great expertise and help us sort through, okay, well, we have some great people in our department right now, and maybe they need to be in different places, and we move some seats around on the bus to match up the way the budget is doing. She's got to come in and take a look under that hood and let us know exactly how she needs to reorganize that. And the good thing is we're all here to help her do that and support her in that process. That needs to happen, and get that budget right, because she's got to be able to make sure she has the right human resources in the right places and the right seats with the right physical resources that she needs, give space and technology and equipment, all of the above. And so that's a big job, and I'm so excited about her ability to come in and help us improve that and get that right, because without getting the budget right, we won't be able to get everything right. And I commend the board and the Board of Commissioners also with in the cities with the elections. This past municipal cycle of elections went well. And I think we had all hands on deck getting it done. Want to thank the CEO's office and Zach Williams, the COO, for helping us make sure those executed properly. So, but my focus will certainly be on the financial resources and making sure we're getting that right. And I'm excited to work with, my board, and also, the Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Davis Johnson is chair of ops, and I know she's going to help us with that process, and the presiding officer is going to help us. So that's going to be my main focus on the board for sure. So,
thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. It's always good to see you. And I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Swift, to tell us a little bit about what you'd like to focus on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Demetrius. So I think there are two areas. First, I'd like to echo what the Vice Chair said about the budget. For me, though, what's important with the budget is just getting the right people into the right roles in the department. The department is amazing. They've done great work, but it's really important that we have everyone rowing the same way in the right role so that they can be the most effective. So I think that how that tags in with the budget is because once we are able to figure out our budget, once our new director is brought on board and is able to determine how the department should be organized, we can put people into the right roles. And that might mean that we're going back to the commission and asking for a few more dollars, because in order to get the right people, we might need to pay them a little bit more. So that might be an ask that we have going, in the future. But the second area, which I want to focus on, and I've sort of talked about it quite a bit, is communication. It's communication with the board, it's communication with the department, and it's ultimately communication with the voter. And so in that area, we're going to need the help of the community to help us to figure out who do we need to communicate? How do we best communicate to different audiences? And the new executive director, Ms. Smith, she is going to be doing a tour of the county, and it's going to be very important for people to talk about, well, what are the groups she needs to talk to? And I think there was a question in the comments that I saw about, what is our plan? We're going to be working to communicate. That means we're going to be training our staff to ensure that they are up to speed with the impact of the new statutory changes that might, be confusing for a lot of voters who voted one way in 2020 and are voting a different way in 2021. To that end, I think there was a question about, the drop boxes. Unfortunately, we have as a board no control over the number of drop boxes that we can only have 6 now. And that is because of statutory change at the Georgia legislature. So, it's important for the community, if you have issues with that, to talk to your legislature, your representatives at the state legislature.
Thank you so much for that. I would like to also just Director Smith, if you'd like to weigh in on that, certainly give you an opportunity as well.
I agree with what has been said. And again, I think it would be premature for me to speak in detail about a strategy, but I am looking forward to focusing on those areas and bringing my expertise and passion for this work to lead the efforts.
Absolutely. And we thank you again. And what I want the citizens to hear tonight is that you got a united front in the Department of Board Elections and Registrations, that everyone is moving forward together. Director Smith is coming in with the support of this board. As you heard from each one of these members that are on tonight, there are a few other questions that have come in, but I would just like to say, again, if you have a question, you can submit that to district5@DeKalbCountyGA.gov, or if you're watching on Zoom tonight or on Facebook, you can drop your comments or questions in the chat. There's one thing, Ms. Swift, that you talked about, which I think is just very appropriate, and it's definitely good. As we saw in the last election, not only were there historic numbers, however, there was a lot of miscommunication as well. And so the question that has come in from us from Mr. Derek Spransey says, I'm glad to hear that you will be focusing on improving the voter experience and developing staff, i.e. training of what you spoke of. One major problem over the last few years, as he states, has been incorrect information given out to voters who call the board with questions or call the office with questions. So I think you all have addressed that by saying that you're going to make sure that as the director comes in, that folks are in the right place, that the correct information is being disseminated, and that folks can go to your website as well or social media to get whatever information they're asking. He says, will you ensure that your staff answering the phones and interacting with the public are fully trained on the Georgia Election Code? And I'm sure that we all could just nod our heads together as a choir and say, yes. If you'd like to speak to that, certainly feel free. And if not, I can move on to the next question.
I think that just goes back to what we talked about with documentation and making sure that there's consistency of information and accuracy of information. And so that is a big part of our priority.
As a pastor of a church, I'd say to everyone, just go directly to the source. Go to the website, call the office, and as they're training, retraining staff and training staff, and we have a wonderful Department of Voter Registration and Elections and have done a phenomenal job. A question, you talked a little bit about it, a couple of you all. There are changes, obviously, to the Georgia voting law and advanced voting locations. You talked some about the drop boxes and how those drop boxes, I think you said, Ms. Swift, we could only have 6 of them now across this entire county, but those locations have also shifted, some of the early voting locations. So a lot of folks might say, I'm used to going to South DeKalb Mall to vote. I'm used to going to different places to vote. They say, I'd love to go to Piccadilly after I voted. And so, they have to make some changes this year. Sam's Club was a former or South DeKalb, et cetera. Can you shed some light on this change? I think you spoke to it. This change was not a change made by the board. This was a change. What was driving this change?
So that was another provision in SB 202 that dictates that early advance voting sites have to either be government owned or they have to be election day precincts. And that eliminated, as you said, South DeKalb Mall as an option. It eliminated Agnes Scott as one of the options for early voting, the location that we had it at there, as well as Core 4 and further north in DeKalb County as options because they don't meet either of those criteria. There was even some confusion and misinterpretation of the law regarding the former Sam's Club that's in Stonecrest, but that is owned by the city of Stonecrest. So as long as it remains that way, we will continue to be able to use that. But the implications of those changes are that it forces us to look at sites that often cannot easily accommodate or were not built to accommodate the kind of space and crowds that are necessary. So the new voting equipment that I mentioned a while ago takes up a lot more space than the old voting equipment did. And so that requires a bigger footprint. And now with the concentration of traffic, with the absentee ballot drop boxes having to also be co-located within these sites, and the people showing up to vote in person and drop off those ballots, it could pose a problem. And so we want the voters to know and understand why those changes are happening. They will continue to communicate via all of the various channels that we use to help them to understand. We will encourage folks who intend to vote via absentee ballot to do so as early as possible. Another provision of SB 202 was reducing the amount of time that people have to request an absentee ballot. And so they'll have to do that earlier in the process. And hopefully that means that they will return their ballots earlier in the process and make a plan to vote, understanding that, you know, some of the facilities that we may be using to accommodate early voting were not the ideal facilities, but we're trying to make sure they're geographically spread out, equitably accessible to all voters throughout the county, so that as many people can take advantage of that easily and without a real impact on their time as possible.
There are.
I have a question, Ms. Chair, and that is for students. You know, I think that DeKalb has utilized, I think Agnes Scott, as well as Emory, as voting locations. And of course, that allowed easy access for students to vote. Is there will there be a change under the new law of voting on campus?
Yes, unfortunately there will be, because both of those are private schools. So the buildings that they operate on their campuses are not publicly owned, government-owned properties. We unfortunately, Emory actually did reach out to us asking if they could host an early voting site, and that's currently not going to be possible. So we will work with them and counterparts there to ensure that students who are eligible to vote in the state of Georgia will have clear information about how to access the ballot, how they can get, whether they'd like to vote absentee or in person, how they can get access to that, what locations are closest to their campus if they happen to live on campus, or wherever else they may reside while they're in school.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have a question for you. There was some mention of human error in the past, and you also mentioned some training that's coming up. Can you give us some ideas as to, or some details as to how much training staff will be getting, either hours or general areas that they're going to be directed to pay attention to, so that our residents are able to go through the voting experience relatively quickly?
Sure. So we're still in the process of developing all of that. One of the great things that we had the opportunity to do last year, myself and Commissioner Ted Terry took a site visit out to Orange County, California, and got to observe in person a special election that they conducted. And they actually have some specially developed training, I believe, by Southwest Airlines that they've put in place that is extensive. And we've talked about looking at benefiting from and learning from how they've put that in place, both for our staff and for our poll workers that support the voters. So here in Georgia, we've got Chick-fil-A and others who are fantastic logistical leaders and are known for the training that they provide. So we've already started that conversation amongst the board members and what that might look like and who we might partner with. But the details will start to take shape as Ms. Smith comes on board under her leadership and gets her leadership team together to ensure that the staff that support the voters have all of the information that they need, even as they're learning.
All right, thank you. And I also want to say, Ms. Smith, you got a lot of compliments from co-chair Nancy Jester. So you got some work ahead of you. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, both Commissioner, Presiding Officer Patrick and Deputy Presiding Officer Johnson. I'd like to just for a second, so the public has had a chance to hear about what you plan to do as a board and what you plan to do to move this county forward, but move the Office of Voter Registration and Elections forward. I'd just like the public to get an opportunity to really be able to see you a little bit closer to that end. The question I'd like to ask is, as we're in Black History Month and as we have seen, and even at the beginning of this town hall, heard Commissioner Davis Johnson speak about voting rights. I'd just like to know if you could describe the voter experience in any short word or sentence. Of course, that's hard to do, but what would you say to the voter? What does voting mean to you?
So I have an answer. I just didn't want to talk. I wanted to give my colleagues the opportunity to speak up if they'd like to.
I was just going to say, I'm of the age where my grandmother did not always have the right to vote, given her time, right? So I'm very cognizant that I'm from my grandmother to me, the third person to be able to exercise the franchise, right? And so that's not lost on me. And certainly the African-American experience and all of the obstacles they have faced with voting is, we've got to, really consider that, especially in Black History Month where we are. And so those things aren't lost on me. And my mother was she absolutely beat it into me that you got to go vote. That's the first thing you do when you turn 18. You go register to vote. This is before motor voter, and you had to go down there and register to vote. And she made sure to take me down there. And I don't think I've missed an election since I was 18 years old and voting. And so I'm very cognizant of all the people that came before me, all of our ancestors that didn't have the opportunity, whether it was from women's suffrage or from Jim Crow era or, certainly previous to that and the horrible effects of slavery on our nation. So I'm very cognizant of that every time I go in the ballot box. And, we may not always agree on who we're voting for and why and the issues that animate us and our voting choices. But I think we can all agree that people have fought for us to have this right and ability, and that is never lost on me. And I love being united across the spectrum of thoughts and perspectives and opinions and philosophies in how absolutely solemn that particular issue is for us. And I think we are united in that. And that that's a great American experience. It's a great American story. So thank you for asking me. That's a very deep question. I did not expect that, Mr. McCoy. So you gave me something to really think about there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that was the pause. For me, voting is just a sacred right. And oftentimes we think that, our vote, it's one vote out of millions of votes. But if your vote wasn't important, there would not be all these reasons why lots of people couldn't vote over time, why there are all these changes to how we vote and who can vote. So I joined the Board of Elections because I really believe in the sacredness of our right to vote. And I believe that everyone should have access. It should be equitable. And that's why we need a board that is excited, but also cohesive and working and is listening. We're here because we're here to support voters. Because we're a voter just like you are. So I think that would be my why.
And I'd say for my part that it's a legacy from both sides of my family. On my father's side, I think often and some talk often to my, I don't even know how many greats removed from us she was. We just called her Aunt Big Rose. And she was one of the several aunts who raised my father after he was orphaned. And she actually was the daughter of emancipated enslaved people. And I'm not that, advanced in age. And one of the people who raised me and my younger brothers is somebody whose parents were enslaved. She did not pass until I was in undergrad. And so her life and her experiences, her spirit still guides me. And I do not take that for granted. On my mother's side of the family, her father was a leader in the Urban League movement. He was a Whitney Young protege. They traveled all over moved around the Midwest, leading in the civil rights movement. And my mother's family had to make a lot of sacrifices for that in order to fight for that vote. So it's something that really is a part of my upbringing, who I am. I don't say that it's always at top of mind because it's just in my bones and in my blood. And I think for as hard as people fought for all of us to be able to access the ballot box, because it was a very, very narrowly available right at the beginning of this country's founding. That voters deserve to be able to have easy access and a pleasant experience when they show up to vote. And that is what we're responsible to do as a board and as our executive director, and that we are 100% committed to doing.
Wow, there you have it, DeKalb. I wanted you to hear that, to know that the folks who are at the helm of leadership at the Board of Voter Registration and Elections are not just folks who are just in positions, are not folks who are just sitting there making decisions. These are folks with a strong conviction about your right to vote. With that, there were a few other questions that did come in, and we're going to wrap up in just a second.
If I could speak on
Yes,
that.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
It's really warm, heartwarming to hear those comments, because me, just like Nancy Jester stated that she has voted in every election since she turned 18. I have done so as well. And so I think it's very important, and it's very important. It's a fundamental right, and I'm so glad that you asked that question. But I would like to say that the state board, voter registration, Secretary of State's office was invited to participate on this panel. And I would like everyone to know that we extended an invitation for them as well, so that if you had any questions of them, that they would be on firsthand to answer those questions. But we did not get a response. And so that is why they're not here. But I appreciate the dialogue that DeKalb's Board of Education and Registration is having tonight, because through all of the obstacles that challenge us, they're giving me hope, and I'm sure many others, that despite the obstacles, that we're going to be able to exercise our right to vote, because it's a sacred right, and it's one that we should cherish and utilize. So that discussion has just touched me tonight, and I just wanted to say that because I'm excited. I'm excited about our board. I'm excited about DeKalb, and I'm looking forward to these elections, in spite of the fact that these obstacles are confronting us. So thank you.
If I could just follow up, talking about my first voting experience as an immigrant to America. When I finally got my citizenship, immediately I had the opportunity to register. I was at the old post office in downtown Atlanta. And I actually voted, I believe it was over in the Dunwoody area. It was a tremendous honor to be able to be, like everyone else, standing in line and being able to cast my vote for who I thought was the right person at the time. And so I know everyone here has much more history with that, but I did want to say that as an immigrant, it is a tremendous honor to be able to vote in America. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say we don't have much time left, and I do know that we have questions remaining. And so, Demetrius, if we could get to some of those questions, and also we will provide information to our listeners as to where they can send questions if they're not reached tonight.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And every question that comes in to us, whether through the chat feature or email to us, if it is not answered tonight, we will follow up and make sure that is answered. So if you do have a question that we cannot get to, and you've emailed it to District 5 or you put it in the chat, we would like you to know that we're going to get back to you. Two final questions, which are very appropriate for what you spoke of and for the collaboration that we see here tonight between our board of elections, voter registration and elections, as well as two of our commissioners. The operational changes that you're going to be making, will they require oversight or approval by state officials? And what partners particularly will help you to institute those changes?
So to the first part of the question, no, they don't require any oversight from the state level. In terms of partnership, the Board of Commissioners and CEO's office, the county, is our primary partner by the law that establishes us as a board. They're our funding partner. And so we work, as you can see tonight, closely with them, stay in contact. Even before Nancy joined us on the Board of Elections, we worked together as she was a commissioner on the original committee that we put together back in 2019, I believe. And so that cooperation remains with our Board of Commissioners, and we have ongoing discussions within the county organization. They have been extremely supportive of us and trying to understand what our goals are and be flexible in supporting those needs. Since the Board of Elections is or voter registration in elections is slightly different than some of the other departments that report up through the COO and CEO, but they've been tremendously supportive. I think other groups in the community those that often show up to our board meetings, that reach out to us after those board meetings, that the civic organizations in the community that regularly reach out to the department to ask our voter education folks to show up and speak. Those are also our partners. We've got an extensive stakeholder list that our able communications and PR consultant, Profile PR, has helped us compile since 2020. And so those individuals as well contribute. And we cannot leave out, of course, the municipalities who through state law have now received a lot of responsibility for carrying out their own municipal elections, but they're also our partners in this process.
Thank you so much for that response. Our final question tonight comes from a viewer who says, how are you planning to target voters who in the past utilized sites that have been long utilized but will no longer be utilized in the 2022 election? Are you pulling voter rolls to target those individuals to ensure that they are notified of the changes well in advance of the elections, such as South DeKalb, Emory, and Agnes Scott?
So I just mentioned Profile PR, who we've been partnering with for communications and outreach purposes. And they're top notch. They have been actively engaging and communicating across multiple channels, not just electronic channels, but also radio and newspaper as well, and directly to our partner groups in the community. We will continue to do that. We obviously have redistricting coming up, and so voters will be receiving new voter cards that have updated information about who their elected representatives are and where they vote. We do a lot of direct mail, so you can expect that in terms of communication as well. And we are fortunate to have detailed plans around how we communicate that are shared with us by Profile PR every board meeting on a monthly basis. So the second Thursday of every month at 4:30 p.m. We broadcast those live on Zoom. And if you're interested in hearing more details about those plans, then you're welcome to join. But you also can opt in. I'll put the email address in the chat for how you can opt into our stakeholder list if you'd like to receive that communication on a regular basis.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and thank you to the board. If you all have any closing remarks, we open the floor for you now. And if not, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Robert Patrick and then Commissioner Davis Johnson for any closing comments.
Thank you again, Demetrius. I appreciate that. Again, just wanted to thank the Deputy Presiding Officer and Chair of the Ops Committee for putting this together. I think outreach is a critical thing. Knowledge is power, and that helps our residents. And I know that Commissioner Davis Johnson is definitely focused in on those objectives as well. Thank you to the new board members for your work and your service, as well as to the new director. And I encourage everyone to please come out and vote. It is absolutely critical, regardless of what side you are on the aisle. Come out and vote. Make sure your voice is heard so that your government represents your interests and what you're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Patrick. And just before we give it over to Commissioner Davis Johnson, I do see that we are joined by our Clerk of Courts, Deborah DeBerry, this evening. So thank you so much, Madam Clerk, for joining us as well. We also have our Martyr board member, Mr. Rod Frierson. Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Demetrius. And I tell you, thank you, everyone. This has been an excellent conversation, and it has been very informative. And so I'd like to thank my co-host, Presiding Officer and Commissioner Robert Patrick, for partnering with me to bring this information to the citizens of the 5th and the 1st, and also to DeKalb County in general. Again, I would like to thank our guest, Pastor Mel C. Smith, our Youth Commissioner, Miles Anthony, Congressman Hank Johnson, Chairwoman DeLay Loman Smith, Board Member Nancy Jester, and Board Member Carly Smith, Board Member and Executive Director Keisha Smith. Thanks to DCTV and Diamond Lewis, who is carrying this broadcast tonight. And I wanted to thank my staff, Demetrius McCoy, Demetrius Pickett, Zenise Madison, and Darlene Daly. Thank you all, and to all have a good night. And don't forget to vote.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good night, everyone.
Good night.